The Odyssey arrived last week, and I loved it. I watched it twice in theaters and will probably be going back soon. I don't think it's dramatic to say that this movie was an event. A Christopher Nolan film adaptation of one of the most iconic and well-known stories to date is nothing shy of a big deal. And it's safe to say that Nolan handled it with awe. From the strenuous filmmaking process to the use of heavy-ass and loud-as-hell IMAX cameras to the film being almost entirely practical and shot on location. Yes, even the giant Cyclops was practical. Christopher Nolan went on an Odyssey for the Odyssey. This pays off on the big screen in not only the spectacle, but in the story as well. This is Nolan's highest rated movie. It's breaking box office records left and right, and yet somehow, conservatives are still having a hard time appreciating or even understanding this film. It's quite literally breaking them. But here's the catch. It's not all conservatives. It's the keyboard warrior ones. The SJW conservatives that are fighting a culture war they think is more important than one of the greatest cinematic experiences of the year, if not the past few years. They thought that just because there was online backlash and criticism for a historical movie having race swaps, that everyone else in the world would feel the same. Well, the real world doesn't feel the same. In fact, the real world doesn't give a shit. That's right. These chronically online conservatives are turning into the one thing they hate the most. Liberals. Or at least, they're turning into their perception of what a liberal is. A snowflake, a keyboard warrior, an SJW, someone with all bark and no bite. Someone who is so disillusioned from the realities of the outside world that when you hear what it is they believe, you can't help but laugh.
In a film about Greek mythology, keyword, Greek, not a single Greek actor was given a part in the Odyssey. For their next huge embarrassing failure, maybe Hollywood can put together an all-Iranian cast for American Pie.
And poetically enough, The Odyssey has been the perfect, unintentional Trojan horse for these conservatives. A movie that they thought was packaged as another one of Hollywood's woke films, filled with colored people and trans people, getting them all riled up and certain that this film was just going to be another product of the woke left propaganda machine. Because hey, we all know that if Christopher Nolan wants an Oscar, he needs to do his DEI due diligence. But then The Odyssey actually released, and ended up being a conservative's wet dream, with conservative/traditional themes being the main focus of the Odyssey story. The online right that was screaming and crying woke are now left confused and unsure of how to react, even causing infighting between the conservatives that can look past their own racism and enjoy the movie, and conservatives that will do anything but give up their anti-woke shtick. But before we talk about the movie itself and how conservatives are reacting to it now, I want to talk about how they reacted to it then, before The Odyssey even came out. Now, there were three main grievances that conservatives had when discussing Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey.
1. Race swap fatigue.
Race swap fatigue.
2. Gender ideology fatigue.
Gender ideology fatigue.
And 3. Zendaya fatigue.
And Zendaya fatigue. Wait, Zendaya fatigue isn't a real one. I mean, none of these are real. They're just excuses to be a bigot, but Zendaya fatigue is especially not a real one. I think he just threw that in there to add time to the video. This is The Critical Drinker, one of the biggest right-wing movie reviewers on YouTube. And while he hasn't reviewed The Odyssey quite yet, he has talked about the movie leading up to its release. This video isn't good. In fact, none of his videos are because they aren't movie reviews, they're just, does this movie fit into the very slim, ideal political worldview that me and my audience has? And majority of the time, it doesn't, giving Critical Drinker enough contentious content to make a living off of. However, this video is good for the sake of my video, because it gives us a good summary of the arguments that conservatives were using to manufacture backlash over this film.
Let's start with the first one, because, well, it's first.
If my writing is ever this bad, you have my permission to unsubscribe immediately.
Now, you don't need me to tell you that there's been a frustrating rise in the race swapping of established characters, and in some cases, actual historical figures in recent years. And of course, it only ever goes in one direction. There's this weird assumption that every other culture, race, and ethnic group in the world are entitled to their own unique stories, history, and identity, and it all has to be carefully fenced off, protected, and respected. Whereas anything created by white Europeans is treated like some generic all-you-can-eat buffet that everyone's allowed to stick their hands into.
Okay, so the Critical Drinker and conservatives everywhere are saying that race swapping is bad because white people are having their history and culture being misrepresented by inaccurate portrayals done by colored people. All the while, they're not able to be cast in roles that are historically or culturally colored without receiving backlash. So to them, It's unfair. In this case, they're particularly upset that Helen of Troy is being played by Lupita Nyong'o, a black actress instead of a white Greek actress. Helen is one of the most important characters in the Odyssey. Her beauty plays a huge role in the story. She was Greek. Well, okay, none of the white actors or actresses are Greek either. Matt Damon is from Massachusetts, not Crete. Anne Hathaway is of Irish descent and was born in Brooklyn, New York, and she certainly does not look Greek. But I'm not hearing any complaints about their casting. So if this isn't about the other actors' ethnic backgrounds, it has to be about their physical appearance, which means that conservatives just want white people. Blanket statement. If instead of Lupita Nyong'o, Christopher Nolan casts Sydney Sweeney, then I'm sure these same conservatives wouldn't have been as upset, regardless of the fact that Sydney Sweeney has no cultural ties to Greece whatsoever. In fact, I'm sure they would have been overjoyed at that casting. But then, what is the point? You're kind of giving yourself away here. And listen, I'm not a huge race swap proponent myself, but not because I'm racist and think that white people are victims in any given situation, but because race swapping is a lazy way to create diversity in media. And I would instead prefer to see people of color cast as original characters more often. But that's the difference. Diversity. White people had their cake and ate it too. I don't need to see more white people in media. White people don't need to see more white people in media. Diversity is needed because it's a reflection of our everyday life, and it's a reflection of how diverse the world around us is, which is not just white. Diversity helps us out of echo chambers. It inspires our youth, and it lends a hand to fresh new stories that have been told for hundreds of years. And that's the other thing. When we're talking about historical accuracy in film and how people of color can play historically white people, but white people can't play historically people of color, there's a reason for that. White stories aren't being told to uplift the white youth or inspire the next generation of white people, because white people have not historically dealt with systemic racial prejudice. So when people of color are cast in place of white people, it is because that role is not white. There is nothing culturally significant that ties a white person to that role other than their literal skin tone. Sure, historical accuracy too, but no one's watching a movie that is 100% accurate to its time period, otherwise it would be a really boring movie. But white people can't play historically or culturally black and brown roles because those roles actually have cultural weight, and their skin color actually means something within the context of the film. Helen of Troy was not a real person. Sure, if she was, she would most likely have had a white skin tone, but that is entirely irrelevant to the story. The only important physical trait Helen of Troy requires for the story is that she is beautiful, that she has the face that launched 1,000 ships. And Lupita Nyong'o is an objectively beautiful actress, who I think plays Helen very well. And if you can't watch the Odyssey without thinking to yourself, well, technically, a black person wouldn't have been in a position of power in Greece during this time period, and that takes me out of the film entirely, then you're just obsessed with race. I don't know what else to tell you. You're obsessed with race more than the people that want diversity. Now, before we move on to the next thing that conservatives had a problem with, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video. In the digital age, your identity, contact information, and financial data are constantly target opportunities for data brokers and scammers. Staying safe online isn't just about hiding where you are, it's about proactively protecting who you are. And this doesn't just go for you personally. Think about your parents who might be less internet savvy and unsure of who is a scammer and who isn't. One time I was barely able to save my mom from giving out all of her credit card information to someone on the phone who simply just asked for it. Hey, sometimes that's all it takes. But that's why I use Surfshark, the sponsor of today's video, and their security suite to protect myself and my poor mother and father. They were just born in the wrong generation. One of my favorite features is alternative ID and alternative number, which lets you mask your real name and contact details with generated persona data on untrusted websites to avoid spam and data leaks. Whenever you shop or conduct banking online, Surfshark's high-grade data encryption and network-level protection keep your financial information secure. And if you ever want to avoid price discrimination or bypass local restrictions, Surfshark has reached coverage in 100 countries, making them the only service to hit that global milestone. On top of this, you don't need separate accounts for all your tech. One subscription covers unlimited devices simultaneously across PC, Mac, iOS, Android, and smart TVs. They also back everything up with 24/7 live customer support and operate under a strict no-logs policy, ensuring your private activity stays private. Take full control of your digital life today. Go to surfshark.com/Saji Sharma and enter code Saji Sharma at checkout to claim 4 extra months of Surfshark. That's surfshark.com/Saji Sharma with promo code Saji Sharma. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link right at the top of the description. Now back to the video. The second gripe conservatives had with the Odyssey is gender ideology fatigue.
We all know that Elliot Page recently transitioned from female to male, and that's fine by me. I hope he's living his best life now and that he's happy and fulfilled. But it does create a bit of a problem when it comes to casting, because Elliot Page is 5'1" and weighs about 90 pounds soaking wet.
Interestingly enough, it seems like Critical Drinker's critique of Elliot Page's casting has less to do with them being a trans man and more to do with him being a small person?
What the fuck is he supposed to fight against? I mean, his own armor probably weighs more than he does.
Which I guess I'll debunk too, even though this is way easier. A lot of rumors were going around that conservatives latched onto, saying that Elliot Page was going to be playing Achilles, which they took deep offense to because according to lore, Achilles was the greatest warrior ever known. Of course, and as we've already covered, that lore is fictional, but conservatives don't care. And even based off of rumor, they were spreading the news like wildfire, comparing Page's casting to when Brad Pitt played Achilles in the movie Troy, trying to point out how much larger in size and more accurately built Brad Pitt is to take on the role. This argument was funny for two reasons. One, because it's clear that conservatives were trying to bring up this movie to say, oh, look how accurate we used to make our Greek adaptations before woke took over the world. Like everyone didn't hate this movie before conservatives had a reason to bring it up again. And the other reason this argument is funny is because Elliot Page isn't even playing Achilles. He's playing a soldier named Sinon, which brings up the Critical Drinker argument, which is that Elliot Page is too small to play a Greek soldier. What, like any Greek soldier? Let's just forget that the Odyssey is not real for 1 second. You don't think that a single Greek soldier was the same size and height as Elliot Page, like ever in Greek history?
The moment he's on screen amongst other men, he's gonna look like a small, malnourished child playing at soldiers.
Not that I think Elliot Page looks malnourished, because I don't, but you don't think Greek soldiers were ever malnourished? When they were off at war? When the soldiers were lost at sea for years, you don't think the lack of food made them look smaller? I mean, I don't like to call people names, but maybe you're just a dumb person. Maybe you're just stupid. Now, if we're talking about the transphobic argument that conservatives used, they were basically saying that Elliot Page is a trans man, therefore he cannot play a cis man. So they're just being transphobic. There's not much to argue there. If you can't watch the Odyssey because you don't think trans people have the right to exist, that's your own fucking problem, man. I mean, these were the arguments that we're dealing with here. Helen of Troy is black and there's a trans man in the movie. That's literally it. Besides, I guess, Zendaya fatigue, but I told you the Critical Drinker was really grasping at straws here. He's the only person I heard bring that up.
Not only is she in 4 separate high-profile movies this year alone, plus Euphoria on TV, but she also seems to be getting lavished with so much news coverage and fake praise that it's becoming exhausting.
If you're tired of Zendaya, you hate movies too. But these arguments are simply trite. It's the same right-wing rhetoric we hear all the time. There's too much diversity. DEI is taking over the world. Wokeness is killing our children. But how did the movie actually do?
The Odyssey is predicted to generate $80 to $100 million domestically this weekend. Add another $100 million overseas, and it could be a $200 million opening weekend for this polished turd. Not too bad, right?
It did really well. It did very well and is still continuing to soar past expectations, including but not limited to conservative ones. Not only did the Odyssey do well, it's also a fantastic movie. As someone who had their own Greek mythology phase in life and read both the Iliad and the Odyssey, the movie was something I needed. It healed the inner child in me by appealing to my adult self. However, it is breaking the online conservative right, and honestly, that's just another plus of the movie. The Daily Wire is falling apart at the seams, with Ben Shapiro defending the movie and Matt Walsh tearing it apart. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, and without giving anything away, there are a lot of conservative themes that are based upon and relate to Christian values. Things like when you sin and have to repent from those sins, a strong messaging of family values, and a lot of the women and women of color roles just being restrained or less involved. Joel P. Christensen, editor of the Oxford Critical Guide to Homer's Odyssey, said, "I'm really disturbed that so much of the conversation has been about how woke or progressive this film was going to be. I actually think it's a very conservative film. The roles for women are constrained. The interracial casting is women of color who just get to be married to white men, which is not progressive. On the other side of the coin, some people see the movie as having a problem modernizing too much of the ancient Greek text. Even Emily Wilson, the writer of the Odyssey translation that Nolan based his film off of, critiques this film adaptation quite a bit.
I'm not sure if I see it as an entirely anti-war film, but it certainly presents us with an Odysseus who feels very bad about certain things that he's done in war and is struggling to process them in a very, I would say, very modern psychiatrized way. He has to make the protagonist a likable all-American hero,
Right.
which is a real challenge if you're basing this on a poem where the hero is not necessarily motivated by romantic love or being a nice suburban parent, but actually he wants glory. And he wants to get spoils from the sack of a city.
For those that don't know, conservatives were also writing this film off because they think Emily Wilson's Odyssey translation is a feminist approach to the source material. So to know that Nolan was going to be adapting Wilson's translation in his film was only but another drop in the woke bucket. But to now find out that Emily Wilson might actually think that the Odyssey is too woke or too modern, conservatives have nothing left to stand on. On top of this, the complaints about the casting choices don't hold as much weight as conservatives initially thought, because guess what? Both Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page were barely fucking in the movie. These are facts about the Odyssey, which is that Elliot Page has 5 minutes and 30 seconds of screen time, and Lupita Nyong'o has 3 minutes and 42 seconds of screen time. Which begs the question, why were the actors so prominent in the advertising for this film? They actually weren't prominent in the advertising of the film? You just want a reason to freak out over colored and queer people. So ultimately, the Odyssey is putting conservatives in a corner and making them fight it out. On one side, you have the conservatives who are doubling down on the Odyssey, being nothing more than woke garbage doing its DEI due diligence to secure Oscar buzz. On the other side, you have the conservatives joining the public and praising Nolan's work while also trying to slight right-wingers for panicking over nothing. And then somewhere in the middle, you have the conservatives whose programming is failing them.
I'm not going to give money to this movie. That would be part of the problem. Like, is it so hard to say from a principled stance, I refuse to engage in this piece of culture? Like, okay, I don't like Taylor Swift. I don't like the messages she sends to young women. I don't like the WNBA. I don't like kneeling for the national anthem. Therefore, I won't be giving them any of my money.
People like Benny Johnson here, who are so used to having one-dimensional, simple, spoon-fed rhetoric to feed to their viewers, are now left like confused, lost sheep without their shepherd. Because for once in their life, the grift requires some form of self-autonomy instead of just having to follow the conservative groupthink machine. I'll watch world-renowned film critics, Nerdrotics and The Critical Drinker for their reviews and leave it at that. Benny Johnson is a sheep that can't think for himself. And world-renowned film critics is crazy. But for the conservatives that are, and I can't believe I'm saying this, ballsy enough to choose a side, well, there's a lot. That's right. Ben Shapiro likes this movie. Ben Shapiro loves this movie. He won't shut the fuck up about it. Ben Shapiro is somehow the last bastion of conservatives that can enjoy art without letting wokeness get in the way.
So I know a lot of people were like, oh my God, Lupita Nyong'o is supposed to look like Diane Kruger. I don't know, Diane Kruger doesn't look very Greek. She's German. So Lupita Nyong'o is a beautiful woman, but
wow. I mean, this just isn't something I expected. Now, Ben is still transphobic towards Elliot Page in this video.
There's just no other way to put it. Elliot Page is still a woman, and the voice is the voice of a woman. And having a woman pretending to be a youngish man telling you these things does not land in the way that it should.
I didn't let this review wash away all the bigotry I knew he had. But this perspective that Ben takes is saying that all of the conservatives panicking over this movie being garbage because woke are essentially just being performative and reactionary. And this movie deserves its flowers for not only appealing to the average conservative, but also for being a great movie. And a lot of other conservatives are agreeing with him. Dave Rubin defended the Odyssey and said, "The movie was spectacular. I tweeted that it was an absolute masterpiece and the responses were psychotic." Other conservatives were even denouncing how hard the right was going at the Odyssey prior to its release. Hot take, I say this as a conservative commentator and someone who knows film criticism very well. The Odyssey would have gotten worse reviews and made less money if the online conservative machine didn't go after it so hard before it came out. This is one of the worst backfires I've ever seen. We must do better. While on the other end of things, we have the conservatives who are doubling down on everything they said prior to the film's release. I say this with sadness, not anger. If you bought a ticket for the Odyssey this weekend, you have surrendered the right to complain about Hollywood ruining movies. Your words and actions are not in alignment. You cannot lead others because you can't even follow yourself, says George Alexopoulos, a clearly Greek man, therefore one you can trust. Or how about Matt Walsh, an employee of the Daily Wire and one of Ben Shapiro's closest associates, who decided to disobey the words of his master. Just saw the Odyssey. Despite what you may have heard, literally all of the criticisms by conservatives were entirely correct. The movie is just as woke as you fear, if not More so, the DEI casting is atrocious. Completely takes you out of the story right from the beginning. But even worse than that is Nolan's decision to turn Odysseus into an anachronistic, whiny, solemn shell of a man plagued by trauma and guilt. That's the same critique that Emily Wilson had. Interesting. You never feel like you're 3,000 years in the past. You feel like you're watching modern Americans put on a pageant, because you are. Nobody would be calling this thing a masterpiece if it was made by a director not named Christopher Nolan. Now, I don't know what this means for Ben and Matt's relationship at the Daily Wire. Probably nothing. This back and forth is probably generating more views than they've gotten all year, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was entirely manufactured. But I think it's important to note that Ben Shapiro is siding with the public here, going against what the majority of chronically online conservatives are saying and siding with the people that think they're crazy, calling it out for what it is. An overreaction. The online right has become a place of constant distraction by directing the blame off of the real perpetuators and onto harmless and innocent parties. They've been doing this, calling films woke and sending death threats to actors of color or actresses for years now. And it's worked in the past because those movies do badly anyway. They just blame it entirely on woke casting. Movies like the live-action Moana or Supergirl didn't do bad because women or colored people, they did bad because they weren't good. But for whatever reason, them doing the exact same thing to a Christopher Nolan film completely backfired in their face. It's not like the anti-woke conservative movement ever had any public sway, but I think especially after this, they will have none. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, consider subscribing, and if you want to help support the channel, then become a channel member. You'll get access to channel perks like new videos early and priority responses to your comments. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.